Welcome to the Partardez channel. Today we explain Prophets Kings 2, chapter 12 in a clear and simple way, step by step. We're diving into a genuinely fascinating chapter today. It is a story packed with politics, money, massive construction projects, and ultimately a really heartbreaking tragedy. It gives us a completely unfiltered look into the administrative and spiritual realities of ancient Judah. And as we'll see, it shows how a king's reign can begin with absolute, perfect righteousness, yet end in sudden, brutal betrayal.
To really unpack everything, we're going to break the chapter down into 6 simple parts. First, we'll look at the context and Joash's early reign. Second, the temple repair problem. Third, the new collection system. Fourth, Hazael's threat and ransom. Fifth, the assassination of Joash. And finally, we'll wrap up with key ideas and practical life lessons.
All right, let's jump straight into section 1. Context, and Joash's early reign, which gets off to a very righteous start.
So, looking closely at the first 2 verses, we're introduced to our main figure, King Joash. He ruled for 40 long years in Jerusalem. The text specifically places him in the historical timeline by noting that his reign started in the 7th year of King Jehu, who was ruling up north in Israel. We're also given his mother's name, Zibiah, from Beersheba, which is a very standard historical marker used in the Book of Kings to track the royal lineage. But the absolute most important detail here is his character. The text explicitly says he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. Why? Well, it directly links his righteous behavior to the instruction of Jehoiada, the priest. He had a spiritual mentor, and as long as he had Jehoiada guiding him, Joash stayed perfectly on the straight and narrow.
But there's a catch. Verse 3 points out a critical underlying flaw in the kingdom, the bemot, or high places. Even though the king was doing what was right, and the official worship down in Jerusalem was fully functioning, out in the countryside, the everyday people were still taking shortcuts. They were offering sacrifices and burning incense at these local, unauthorized shrines, instead of making the required journey to the central temple in Jerusalem. This is a huge detail. It tells us that while the leadership at the top was solid, there was this lingering, partial disobedience in the spiritual life of the everyday nation that just wasn't dealt with.
That brings us to section 2, the temple repair problem, funds without action.
In verses 4 and 5, Joash comes up with what sounds like a perfectly reasonable administrative plan. The Holy Temple in Jerusalem has some serious physical damage, and it needs fixing. So he tasks the priests with taking the various sacred financial offerings and using that money directly for the repairs. He identifies 3 specific streams of revenue. There's the standard census tax, money from specialized personal vows, and completely voluntary free will offerings. Joash tells the priests, essentially, take this money from your treasurers and fix the building. It makes total sense, right? The priests are already there, the money is flowing in, they should logically just manage the construction project.
But then we hit a massive roadblock in verse 6. By the 23rd year of King Joash's reign, absolutely no repairs had been made. Think about the scale of that failure for a second. 23 years have gone by. The money has been steadily flowing into the priest's hands from the census, the vows, and the offerings, but the broken walls, the damaged courtyards, literally nothing has been touched. The bureaucracy had completely stalled out. There was a total disastrous disconnect between collecting the funds and actually executing the work.
So in verses 7 and 8, Joash is understandably incredibly frustrated. He summons Jehoiada and the other priests and demands accountability. He essentially fires them from the construction job. He officially revokes their right to collect these specific funds and removes them from the repair project altogether. He tells them to stop taking the money from the people, and more importantly, they are no longer in charge of the repairs. And the priests actually agree to this. They agree to step completely back from collecting the money and managing the construction. It is a massive shift in administrative responsibility.
Let's move to section 3, the new collection system, accountability in action. To solve this absolute crisis, verse 9 describes a brilliant, highly structured new protocol implemented by Jehoiada. It's essentially the invention of the world's first secure donation box. Jehoiada takes a physical chest, bores a hole right in the lid, and places it directly beside the altar as you enter the temple. Now, instead of the money disappearing into the personal treasuries of various priests, the entrance guards take the money and drop it straight into this dedicated box. It's visible, it's secure, and it completely bypasses all that previous bureaucratic gridlock.
And they didn't stop there. Verses 10 through 12 lay out a strict, airtight chain of custody. When the chest got full, it wasn't just one guy opening it up in a back room. The king's royal secretary and the high priest came together.
They counted and bagged the silver together. Then, they handed that exactly weighed amount over to appointed supervisors. Those supervisors then turned around and paid the skilled laborers directly, the carpenters, the builders, the masons, and the stonecutters. They also used it to directly purchase the timber and the quarried stone. Finally, the money was hitting the ground and doing exactly what it was meant to do.
Now, the text in verses 13 and 14 gives us a very specific, crucial detail. None of this newly dedicated repair money was diverted into making ceremonial gold or silver items. It would have been so easy, right? To take all these new funds and make the inside of the temple look amazing with new silver cups, wick trimmers, or trumpets. But the text is absolutely clear the money wasn't used for any of that. The priority was the structural integrity of the house of the Lord. Every single shekel went strictly to the workers repairing the physical building.
Verse 15 highlights what I think is a truly beautiful and striking contrast. You have the priests on one hand and the laborers on the other. You would naturally expect the holy priest to be the most trustworthy with the funds, right? But they completely dropped the ball for 23 years. On the flip side, the everyday blue-collar workers, the stonecutters and carpenters, acted with such remarkable honesty and absolute integrity that the supervisors didn't even require an accounting from them. They just handed them the money, completely trusting the work would get done honestly. It is such a powerful statement about true character over a fancy title.
We do need to carefully note verse 16, though, which clarifies a specific exception. Not all money was taken away from the priests. According to Torah law, the money from the specific guilt and sin offerings was designated for the livelihood of the priests. So Joash and Jehoiada didn't steal what rightfully belonged to the priesthood. They just firmly separated the general maintenance funds into that new secure chest, while still making sure the priests kept their legally mandated portion.
All right, moving to section 4, Hazael's threat and ransom, a kingdom in peril.
Just when things are looking incredibly successful internally, verse 17 introduces a severe external military crisis. King Hazael of Aram marches up, attacks the city of Gath, and captures it. Now, Hazael is a massive regional powerhouse. Aram, which is modern-day Syria, was a constant, dangerous thorn in Israel's side. By taking Gath, he proves his military might. But then, terrifyingly, he pivots. He turns his forces to march directly on Jerusalem. The capital city and that newly repaired temple are suddenly in imminent danger of total destruction. To save the city, in verse 18, Joash is forced to make a truly desperate and painful decision. Think about the devastating irony here. He just spent the last section of the chapter entirely restructuring the economy to fix up the temple. But now, staring down Hazael's army, he has to strip it all bare. He takes the sacred objects dedicated by his ancestors, Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, and Ahaziah, along with his own dedicated items. He completely empties all the gold from both the temple and the royal palace treasuries, and he sends it all to Hazael as a massive ransom. It works, Hazael withdraws, but it comes at an incredibly devastating cost to the nation's wealth and dignity.
Section 5. The assassination of Joash, a tragic conclusion.
In verses 19 and 20, the narrative takes a very sudden, dark turn. Joash's own officials conspire against him, and they assassinate the king at a specific place known as Beth Millo. The plain text of this chapter doesn't dive into all the intricate political or personal motivations behind this betrayal. It just presents the brutal fact of it. They struck him down at the house of Millo on the road going down to Silla. It's a highly specific geographic detail that grounds this horrific event in absolute historical reality. The king who started out so righteously, guided by the high priest, is ultimately murdered by his own inner circle.
Verse 21 closes out the historical account with absolute precision. It names the exact assassins, Jozabad and Jehozabad. Despite the violent betrayal, the text confirms that Joash was granted a royal burial with his fathers in the city of David. And importantly, the dynasty of David survives this violent upheaval. The chapter ends by noting the immediate succession of his son, Amaziah, ensuring that the royal line continues forward. Finally, Section 6, Key Ideas and Life Lessons. What do we actually learn from all of this?
When we look at the plain text of this chapter, we uncover some incredibly profound, timeless lessons. We see the absolute necessity of administrative transparency. The invention of that collection chest proves that sometimes you just have to completely change a broken system to finally get results. We also see the immense value of honest labor, those anonymous workers who operated with such pure integrity that no one even needed to check their math. But there are warnings here too. We see the lingering danger of partial obedience. Leaving those high places intact in the background of the nation's life was a symptom of deeper issues. And most soberingly, we learn that having a righteous start and having a great mentor doesn't automatically guarantee you a strong, safe finish.
As we wrap up, this chapter leaves us with a really provocative question to think about in our own lives. Joash did incredible, lasting things for the temple of the Lord, but his reign ended in a humiliating foreign ransom and domestic assassination. So how do we maintain our own integrity so that we finish just as strong as we start? It really challenges us to look out for our own personal high places, those little areas of compromise, and to ensure that our character outlasts our initial enthusiasm. Because ultimately, it's not just about how you start the race. It's about having the deep integrity, much like those unnamed temple laborers, to finish it honestly.
Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.